And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Richard Kinary, who will address us on Faith for Faithless Times, or What Happened to the Movement in the Ethical Culture Movement. Richard is the leader emeritus of the Philadelphia Society for Ethical Culture. He is also a member of the Leadership Training Committee for Ethical Culture. In the 1990s, Richard spent 6 years as the leader of the Queen's Society for Ethical Culture, along with being in Philadelphia. And I know Richard from his time in Queens. He also was the interim leader at Long Island for 1.5 years. So please welcome Richard Kinary.
Sounds like I've been very busy. That's so long ago now. A little history as I start. As Danny mentioned, I'm a retired leader. I retired as leader from the Ethical Humanist Society of Philadelphia almost 2 years now. And since I no longer have the restraints of that job, meaning, when you're the leader of the society, you have to keep everyone happy. And you got to make sure the organization stays on an even keel. Well, I don't have to worry about that now. I'm still a leader of the ethical culture movement, but I can act as a provocateur, or at least in my own mind, imagine myself that. But I do feel that now is time that I can be a heretic and say what I think I've probably wanted to be saying for all those 20-some years I was the leader in Philadelphia. And this morning, this talk, is my understanding of ethical humanist religion. My version, product of my experience. It is also a challenge. I actually think I'm attempting to finish the job of Felix Adler. Finish the job in the sense of articulating a full packaged ethical religion, which sounds like chutzpah on a grand scale, amazing arrogance, but the ethical culture movement has been evolving through all these years, and how often do we actually say, okay, this is where we are? And that's what this talk is trying to be. I don't think all the ideas here are terribly original. I've been collecting them from within and without the movement. And I want us, the idea here is, I want us, meaning the ethical humanist, ethical culture movement, to be direct and clear in our approach to living. Because I do have this exalted perspective on ethical humanism as it ought to be. And that is partly because when I discovered ethical humanism 30 years ago, I was on a search for a worldview within which to place my life. A decade earlier, I had walked away or ran away from Christianity and from the God idea. But I discovered I still needed some kind of foundational idea about the meaning of life. Because of that initial reason for connecting to ethical humanism, I have always been concerned that this movement offer a coherent understanding of what I call the nature of reality. A big picture understanding of the human experience that both speaks to one's personal inner life and to our desire to build a better world. So I have been working at putting my understanding of ethical humanism into a whole package, and this talk is part of it. This is an argument. My argument for bringing the ethical culture movement out of the alternative liberal religion closet and stand up for what it really is, a revolutionary, radical understanding of life. I think there is a unique genius in our philosophy, but we, those within this so-called movement, have taken a too casual attitude towards the importance of this philosophy of life. Now, I must admit, I'm unsure about your individual level of commitment to this ethical humanist religion. I assume that at least some of you have joined a community here, and not necessarily a religion. the philosophy may not matter that much to you. You join a rather open-minded group that is committed to making life better. They have interesting talks on Sunday mornings and experience, an ethical experience for children. And here I come along to press the point that this society is part of a religion with a philosophy. You may not need a big picture like I do, but I hope you appreciate that if you need it at different times of your life, you're looking for what the hell is life all about? Well, here it is. You can find it within this movement. There is a deep understanding of human life that can be as the foundation of this movement. Okay, there are parts of this. I'm sorry to tell you, lots of parts. It's sort of popular philosophy, but bear with me. It might take some time. In ethical humanism, we try to be nice and respectful of traditional organized religions. But from the point of view of our relatively rational philosophy, those traditional religions don't make much sense. They are about upholding the grand old mysterious religions. But to be honest, the basic stories of those religions haven't made much sense in at least 200 years. Which doesn't mean there isn't value in some aspects of those religions and those traditions. And some congregations out there are building wonderful communities where people are finding meaning for their lives. My problem with those traditions is that although most of the folks in the pews may not believe in the old myths any longer, the otherworldly mentality continues to be the default position to which people return if challenged. And rather than being diplomatic and nice, I think it's time, at least among ourselves, to admit that organized religion, as distinct from us, which is disorganized religion, organized religion has reached its limit at making human beings better people. Those religions, the underlying philosophy of those religions don't help. Since making people good is supposedly one of the primary excuses for the existence of any particular religion, it's time to unpack more energetically our radically different approach to religion and offer it more definitely as not merely an alternative, but as a replacement for the failed religions that continue to play a part in screwing up our world and screwing up humankind. And to start that process, as far as I'm concerned, it's time to move on from dependence on the deed before creed adage that you hear quite often as a description of the ethical culture, ethical humanist movement. On hearing it, people assume that we are neutral territory, and that if you're a good person and vote Democrat, we will not challenge you with the subtlety of our perspective on life. Yes, it is true that we stress action over supposed theories, but theory affects action. The way you think affects the way you act. So it's time to boldly say, creed makes a difference, and our ethical humanist creed makes more sense than those ancient transcendent religions. And it's more effective at making people good and our world better. How you act, your deeds demonstrate who you are, but who you are is dependent on what is in your head. Our creed about bringing out the best in life is our avenue to the best you and the best me. And that principle ought to be revealed in our deeds. But before I get to the creed before deed part, I must admit that I have another angle here. I have a sense of emergency about the plight of humankind at this time in history. And I believe our ethical humanist approach, our approach to living, can be an answer to that plight. Ethical culture has been a great idea since St. Felix started in 1876. But in our day, that understanding of life has become even more essential as human beings try to respond to the many crises that we are now facing. So besides this talk being a presentation of the ethical humanist approach, it also offers my opinion that this approach is a way of saving a messed up world. Humankind is possibly in terminal trouble. The human experiment that has been in process for hundreds of thousands of years has reached a limit. In the process of reshaping the natural world to our needs, we may have gone too far in reshaping human beings into takers and not lovers of life. And at this point in history, there is limited time and space to turn it around. So for want of a better explanation for the monumental crises, both environmental and social, that we face, I offer religion as the problem. Yes, believe it or not, religion is the problem. Global warming has the oceans rising, and we have depleted the resources of the earth, including human resources. Population growth is out of control. Religious fanaticism, genocide, poverty, and economic exploitation continue unabated. And I'm claiming the problem is religion. Yes. And here's why. Humankind is in trouble because of the minds of the human population. And religion is one of the mental blocks causing the trouble. I'm fond of reminding people that religion is nothing special. There are many things in this world that are sacred. Children, great art, the Beatles' music, your mind, maybe the most sacred, but not religion. That is just a human invention, a tool that is supposed to serve us human beings. Human beings have a tendency to want to be somebody, and religion serves that need. We are self-conscious beings, and we are conscious of ourselves among other self-conscious beings. And in that relational experience, we want our lives to mean something. We want to feel our lives are connected to the whole. And that is where religion comes in. Religion is the culturally created social category that holds the meaning of life stories. The cubbyhole where human beings organizationally put the stories. The big picture that becomes the theoretical foundation of any society. It offers people a sense of place, a place in that really big process. Even though most people take our culture's supernatural story for granted and others reject it outright, the basic understanding that there is foundational meaning out there somewhere that is already set becomes the unexamined mindset of the whole culture. Even those of us who reject a God idea as a foundation for our understanding of life, too often we still hold on to the mindset that expects there to be some ultimate answer, some arbiter, some meaning, some kind of first cause. We're acting as if there is a plan, some natural law, some truth that offers a sense of security and confidence as we tell other people why they are wrong. We human beings who come out of the womb prepared by nature to love life are placed into an environment in which fitting in is all important. Every culture has its box into which it tries to squeeze the people. And especially in Western religion, that understanding starts with the idea of God as Lord, the lawgiver, the Father, the King, the source of truth, an arbiter of good and evil. That assumption, which actually goes beyond any particular God idea, is a sense, it includes in itself a sense of a legitimate authority above and beyond that becomes the foundation of the hierarchical authority in our culture, in world culture, that spreads throughout the whole culture and continues to curse humankind. There is a sense that there is a right way. The truth is out there, somewhere. And the people with power, from parents to men, politicians to priests, get to speak for the truth. Authority is not in our individual hands. It's out there in the hands of those who supposedly have a connection to the truth beyond. Humankind must get out of that mentality. To turn it upside down, an ethical humanist religion does that. I'm trying to make a case for the idea that human beings, at least for now, still need religion. In fact, humankind is suffering from a lack of mature, this world, positive, relational religion. As I've already said, religion is a tool to deal with the human need for connection and meaning. And religion is also that part of human culture that says your life should have meaning. Life is better with meaning. Of course, some religions' idea of meaning, some of them is just plain nuts. But regardless, it's always about, religion is always about taking life to a higher level. Yes, all that nature expects of us is that we survive and live long enough to reproduce. It is human nature that gets us thinking about our lives meaning something. And of course, it doesn't have to be organized religion with a capital R. The urge to be someone is expressed in all kinds of ways. Art, sciences, childcare, community involvement, etc. Call it what you will. As a tool for making life better. An open religious conception. Connection to the idea about the meaning of life. That's useful. As a tool, it does something for each and every person that takes up a religion. Religion shouldn't be just a box into which one fits their life. And getting out of the cubbyhole, the mindset that places ultimate meaning in some other realm, is, I believe, the genius of ethical humanism. In ethical humanism, you are welcomed into a world of doubt, in which you must, with the company of those around you, build your own foundation. What we do have as a glorious, mysterious replacement for a God-centered or other-world foundation is the world of human history, is the whole of human history, and the creative energy of all those past and present people trying to make something good. Our foundation is the process. And each and every person can have the realization that they are part of the natural process that is creating this human world. There is no plan to the universe except what the creative energy and people come up with. We are the continuation of the evolutionary process. And in that role, we become moral agents as the only ones in the universe, as far as we know, who can consciously choose what is good or bad for the future of life. Well, can I back that up? I back that statement up with a group of concepts that I think are the foundation of ethical culture, ethical humanism, and have been for the evolving generations. You know, we don't have a metaphysics. Philosophy stopped talking about metaphysics 100 years ago, when philosophers decided the idea of metaphysics, meta, above physics, didn't make much sense. But ethical humanism does have an understanding of the nature of reality, an alternative, natural idea of the nature of our reality that replaces the otherworldly metaphysics or theology of other religions. That naturalistic, relational understanding starts with what is presently called humanism. It is our understanding of the nature of reality. We are a form of religious humanism, but still a humanism. For some humanists, humanism means being totally rational and scientific, and that we are interested only in human concerns and opposed to religion. For me, that sounds like another version of the absolutism of traditional religion. My favorite explanation of humanism comes from Alan Bullock's book, The Humanist Tradition in the West. He says that Western thought has historically treated humankind and the cosmos in three distinct modes. First, the supernatural or transcendent has focused on God, treating human beings and nature as part of the divine creation. Second, the natural or scientific has focused on nature and treats humankind as part of the natural order, like other organisms. And third, the humanistic has focused on humankind and on human experience as the starting point for human beings' knowledge of themselves, of any gods, and of nature. Since I agree with that, I take to mean that humanism is the acceptance of the human condition. That we live in a natural experience, but in a human-made aspect of that natural world. Meaning, not only that we can't know the ultimate meaning of the universe, because there may not be any ultimate meaning, but that ultimate meaning is what we are doing now. Everything, including ideas of God and nature, is experienced through the filter of human meaning. We add the meaning to life. Yes, we are part of the natural world, but human beings have taken our natural experience into our minds and made it a collection of shared ideas. That's where we live. Nature changes in the way human beings think of it. Notice how the human understanding of nature has evolved over thousands of years. It starts as a realm of spirits and mystical forces. That is where our ancestors lived. That world evolved into the idea of nature as a resource to be controlled and made productive. And then into a world of beauty, to a realm of Gaia, and to nature as our mother. Those evolving human concepts are the world in which we live. Strange as it seems, we actually live in an interrelational web of minds, a web of thoughts and feelings that is the human world. Our human world is not just institutions, structures, and collections of people. It is a web of relationships. All of the pieces of daily living, from buildings and machines to customs and values, are expressions of the human mind. We humans have created an evolving understanding of living, including the evolving idea of right or wrong. We live within this human mental world, but each person is creating it themselves as we together create this human world. Everything in this room is an expression of the human mind, down to who and how it is cleaned. And through the years, this room has changed as the minds who have dwelt in this room, the time they have spent with it, how they have related to it in different ways. Which becomes my point. Our human world is a collection of personal, individual, subjective human experiences. Each and every human being is having a subtly different experience, yet it all comes together as each does her or his part. Our human world lives inside each and every human being on the face of the earth. It is a product of the feelings, thoughts, and actions of all the people. We objectify our personal world. We place the pieces into some order, but in reality, it is the amalgamation of each person's personal, subjective experience. We are accustomed to viewing life as static. We don't notice the interrelational flow. And that, in my opinion, is the humanist understanding of reality. That this human world is our production. We build on what our ancestors gave us. And that humanist understanding of reality is a step out of the static understanding of a world in which in which our lives must be lived according to existing rules, values, and boundaries. It's a step into the personal reality of life as an interrelational flow. Each person directing their part of the flow, and other people, not objects, but as subjects, people to affect and to be affected by. You know, the especially negative aspect of standard religious theory is that it takes from human beings their freedom to decide what is right and wrong. It makes us actors in some God's production. And that produces people who don't take responsibility for the world that is actually their creation. You know, as an example, young men who turn to crime, they're not born bad. We have created an environment in which crime makes sense of them. And yet citizens who create the environment place all the blame on those young men and don't step up and take and accept their percentage of the responsibility. Now, how does this understanding of reality create to my perception that humankind is really possibly in terminal trouble? Since I said that ethical humanism is an answer to this dead end that humankind seems to be rushing into, I better offer an answer. Well, I have a long answer and a short answer. And the short answer is our culture with another world religious foundation teaches people to fit in and not realize and accept that we're the creators of our world. And since most people, actual religion is consuming stuff with God and religion as a sideshow, and people are too busy finding fulfillment in their own little worlds, they have no time for greater meaning and concern for the life around them. And it is ethical culture's job to get people living meaningful lives of shared involvement in and responsibility for the world we are making. The long version of that is that you often hear that American culture has gotten shallow. It's a consumer culture. All we care about is having the latest gadgets, living the good life of eat, drink, watch sports, or reality television. We had an election last November in which the major topic became taking care of the middle class. Well, I go to Michael Harrington for a careful, insightful analysis of what's wrong with us. He, who you might know, was a social critic, philosopher, and author of many books, most famously that influential book of the 60s, The Other American. He's also the founder of Democratic Socialists. He makes the case that Western culture has parked the God idea off to one side. And although you hear about God in this culture every time you turn your head, except for the very vocal true believers, people have moved on to a hedonistic absence of greater meaning. There is no grand meaning at the mall. Consuming has become the reason for existing. We don't need a connection to something more noble. Individualism has run amok. The Age of Reason and Thomas Jefferson told us that the individual is central and important. All persons are created equal. But through the years, that has been interpreted to mean not that we create a community in which every individual can find fulfillment, but that we create a community in which the individual has the freedom just to worry about himself or herself. The Paul Riot and Rand version of freedom. Harrington says that historically, God was what gave human beings the sense of connection with meaning and purpose. It gave human life a possible sublime quality. But God has been dying for a long time, and the vacuum left in his absence has been replaced by thoughtless, normless, selfish, hedonistic individualism that is in actuality de facto atheism. Atheism in fact, but not in words. Atheism of meaning. He says de facto atheism is the enemy of both atheistic humanism and religious belief, because both of them are beliefs in the human capacity to aspire to great creative activity. And without a cultural foundation that says life has potential meaning and purpose, silly consuming will take over. If we don't have the sense that life is about making something good, then just enjoying yourself might be all that's left. Now, I don't know if I agree with all of that, but it offers me an opportunity to think about ethical humanism as a replacement for de facto atheism. For better or worse, ethical humanism puts meaning after the death of God into each and every individual's hands. You know, some people don't need a lot of meaning. Enjoying life is enough for them. But Harrington's question is, can humankind survive without a sense of meaning at the center of society? We humans are the ethical animal. A sense of meaning as a sense that our lives matter is the foundation of ethics. We humans decide good or bad about everything. Can we live without a foundation for those decisions? You know, Einstein supposedly said, only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile. Which sounds a whole lot like ethical humanism, and an answer to de facto atheism. Now, not too much more. You may not know this about me, but I'm a curmudgeon. I hate everyone. Part of it is that at my age, this doesn't feel like my world anymore. But I have a problem liking my fellow Americans. Actually a problem liking all of us, including myself. We are all so self-satisfied with our unexamined acceptance of the culturally created lifestyle. I drove to Maine last August to visit friends, and I couldn't help noticing that there were all these nice new cars and SUVs and Winnebagos and campers, and the automobiles had canoes and kayaks and bicycles on the roofs and boats behind. Those were the nature lovers on their way to appreciate nature. And on the streets of cities, everyone seems to be plugged into some expensive device. The wealth, the bounty is overwhelming, and we're supposed to be in some kind of recession depression. You know, I'm actually not being accusatory. Yeah, sure. We ought to enjoy the good things in life. I know I do my part, but the problem is the idea of enjoying yourself becomes the reason for living, the norm, what is natural. We often hear we're obsessed with consuming, but I don't think we take delivery of that reality being the actual foundation of the culture. Our most sacred values are turned into commercials. And the good things never stop increasing. The houses get bigger, the cars get better, over-the-top weddings and children's birthday parties, more entertainment than we could possibly consume, and endless cooking shows offering nuanced, unusual nuances of taste, new wines, new cheeses, new restaurants, and then new diets and therapies. And so many video screens to look into that it gets to the point that you can feel lonely if there's not at least one in view. Again, I'm not being accusatory or trying to spread guilt. Well, maybe I am. But I'm also offering an excuse. I'm pointing out how subtle and all-pervasive the culture of satisfaction as the purpose of life has become. But what are we to do? We're trying to live a good life in the sense of making life better for all. And as a result, we don't want to exploit foreign workers. We would have to go naked if we didn't buy those clothes that some of those exploited workers are making. 2/3 of the human race, human beings on this earth, 2/3 of them do not have access to clean water and live on less than $2 a day. And we feel noble when we buy a Prius. Our natural desire for survival has become, in this human-created world, survival of good living. I came up with this talk, the title of this talk, Faith, or one of the titles, Faith for Faithless Times, by bouncing off Michael Harrington's idea about de facto atheism. In a consuming culture, faith becomes a sham, a neglected, superficial phenomenon. But I also wanted to make the point that while ethical humanism is certainly about making a better world, it is also an approach to personal living. Harrington's de facto atheism is an atheism of meaning. And I believe ethical humanism is a faith that offers meaning to our personal living and a personal approach to a better world. You know, the word faith has an impersonal and personal meaning. In one meaning, a faith is an alternative way of saying a religion. But, to quote James Fowler, faith is a person's way of seeing him or herself in relation to others against a background of shared meaning and purpose. Ethical humanism, ethical culture, is such a location of shared meaning and purpose. In an age of failed transcendent religions and rampant individualism with a culture of satisfaction, I suggest the faith that places each person in a community of meaning with every other human being. What matters in this world are the beliefs in the human heart and and mind. But I continually follow the human world as a product of the inner life of all the human beings. And this faith is speaking to the value system that lives inside each and every person, and that then is taken out into the world and creates this human world. That sense of self becomes the world we make. A self-centered self or a relational-based self. You know, what people glibly call their spiritual life is often just more self-indulgence. But if it is actually about the person wrestling with who they are and what they stand for, working on what they believe and how they are treating others, that is real spiritual struggle. You know, during the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, there were all kinds of Catholic priests and nuns going out there in demonstrations, fighting against racism. But I always wondered why that passion never got down to the parish level. Why didn't the priest in the local parish tell the working class, white ethnic communities that racism was a sin, and that the church was going to help those people get over their racist thoughts and feelings? Well, this is not the 60s and 70s. It's a different time. The world has gotten even smaller, with all the suffering, neglect, and violence so much more obvious. Globalization has not only been an economic phenomenon, but also a social and cultural fact of life. It is more truly one world. And I wonder, who is going to draw the obvious connection between our lives and the world we are creating? An angry, unequal, violent world. Do we continue signing petitions and sending money to the right causes? Or do we work at figuring out how our lives are creating the suffering of this world? My curmudgeonly displeasure with the self-satisfied, enjoy life approach got me comparing the failure of the Catholic Church on the local level in the 60s and the 70s to ethical societies today, and wondering who is speaking up about the self-satisfied, gated community mentality we human beings have built. If not us, who's going to do it? Within ethical humanism, there is a great approach to living, and we ought to be sharing that with this world. But as we do that, we have to figure out that it actually means how we are living our lives. The thing about belief in the humanist perspective, with its acceptance that we create this world, is that it leaves us vulnerable to a sense of shame for not doing more. Now that we cannot hide behind God as the creator of this world, how do we respond? And I leave the answer open, because it's up to each one of us individually to search ourselves and search how we're living. Let me finish by saying I am not necessarily saying that we should change our lives. Not necessarily. But it depends on how seriously we take the evolved creed of ethical culture, ethical humanism. What does it mean as we've come to this point in history? What I am claiming is that our creed is truly revolutionary in the way it points away from individualistic living into communal living, appreciating that people can find meaning, happiness, and cooperatively create a world, a better world. Our creed, our understanding that life is an ethical experience, means that our choices and our decisions are like ripples on the water that change this world. That understanding is contrary to the culture in which we live, which is not an ethical culture. But making an ethical culture is still our job. and that ethical culture ultimately depends on the inner life or the spiritual life of people. Depends on their sense of self. And the bottom line is, who am I and who are you? Well, we have to look around at the world that we